Hello everyone, this is Smartfolk, and today we're going to be talking about why you are wrong about communism. It's a pretty long video, so let's just hop right in.
So sometimes you know what you know, and sometimes you know what you don't know, and sometimes, as the Firesign Theater says, everything you know is wrong.
You know that you're wrong, but you fear you're right.
You suspect you're out of sync. You think that you're out of your mind.
Everything you know is wrong.
I hope I'm not the only one who thought that that was a super weird introduction. Also, the first step to brainwashing is convincing someone that everything they know is wrong.
Despite being decades removed from the Cold War, McCarthyism, and Red Scares, communism is still a dirty word in American politics and society today. That's thanks in large part to a total lack of understanding that Americans have when it comes to communism. And many of the people who don't understand communism also don't understand the true nature of capitalism. So if you think that only communist governments rely on violence, or that capitalism is synonymous with individuality, then everything you know is wrong.
Before I respond, first I must clarify that he's talking about the communist economic system, not necessarily the classless, stateless society that Marx wanted. Secondly, I would like to say that communist regimes seem much more keen to use violence, as 5 of the 6 communist countries, China, North Korea, Vietnam, Laos, Cuba, and Cambodia, have repeated human rights abuses against their own citizens. To be fair, he's technically correct when he says not just communist regimes resort to violence, but it's at such an unprecedented rate that there's a clear distinction to be made. To address his second point about capitalism not necessarily being synonymous with individuality, I'd like to point out that historically capitalism was the result of the individualistic rise of the people from feudalism. And secondly, communism leans much more heavily towards a communal mindset. After all, their slogan is, "Workers of the world unite."
Joining me now is Jesse Meyerson, journalist and
I kinda just want to pause the video right here, because the first time I saw it, I was like, dang, that guy's really creepy.
contributor to Salon.com and Rolling Stone magazine. Jesse, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Tom.
Your most recent piece for Salon, which was brilliant, by the way, is titled Why You're Wrong About Communism, 7 Misperceptions About It and Capitalism. And I think, frankly, the misperceptions about capitalism are even more important than the misperceptions about communism. But, let's just touch on some of this stuff. First of all, what do you see as the most pernicious of the misperceptions about both communism and capitalism?
Well, the main thing that I've been getting over the last month since the 5 economic reforms piece that I had in Rolling Stone is the simple invocation by right-wingers of the name Stalin or Mao as though that performs some sort of like argumentative work, when of course it doesn't, because if you want to invoke the human rights atrocities that happened under communist governments, then I'm afraid you've also got to account for the human rights atrocities that happen under capitalist governments, and nobody's prepared to do that. And
to be fair, this is a very good point. There have been a fair number of capitalistic regimes that have committed human rights atrocities, like the Nazis. But what do they have in common with Stalin and Mao? They're all very authoritarian governments, and with the concentration of power at the top, it gives the government more power to commit more evil. Communism, with its necessary dictates of the government controlling the economic system, automatically gives the government more power, which is why you see more authoritarian governments be communistic in nature.
the thing that I found out with this piece, the one in Salon, comparing the two, is that people like me who are willing to acknowledge that there were horrors that happened under communist dictatorships, the Great Chinese Famine and the gulags and stuff like that, we're willing to admit that, whereas the defenders of capitalism either ignore or deny the atrocities that happened under capitalism. And when you confront them on it, it's like total cognitive dissonance, because we've been taught in this country, frankly, that capitalism is, in every case and everywhere in the world, liberatory and righteous, and that communism is the great evil. And that neither of those is really backed up by the history.
So what are the horrors of capitalism?
Well, I mean, there's so many. At the very beginning of industrial capitalism, when Britain really had its first stirrings of the Industrial Revolution, the great commodity that was really fueling industrialism was textiles. And anybody who knows where cotton was coming from in the late 1700s and early 1800s knows that capitalism therefore thrived on the Atlantic slave trade, Not to mention the extermination of the indigenous population of this country. This book by Mike Davis, Late Victorian Holocaust, which talk about basically British imperialist starvation and not just British, but European imperialist starvation and slaughters in Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America. And then, of course, all the various massacres and coups and horrors perpetrated by the U.S., the CIA, and its allies, its proxies all over the world to defeat communism after the Second World War, including, the movie that is now nominated for an Oscar, the documentary The Act of Killing, which details how 1 million so-called communists in Indonesia were killed. Their names supplied by the CIA. I mean, these are things that good patriotic Americans are never asked to account for, because we're simply told that, like I remember my third grade teacher telling me that communism and democracy were opposites. I can see now how ridiculous that is, and we can see the terrible bankruptcy of intellectual understanding that education like that causes when I release a piece like this and
So
get
what
all
are
this ridiculous backlash from the right.
Slavery is a system that has existed in some form almost since the dawn of man. It is not a problem native to capitalism, but a problem that capitalism inherited. As such, it should be commended that capitalist societies eliminated slavery and not blamed on them for creating it. On his point about the extermination of the native population in the Americas, this was more the fault of religious extremism in the form of manifest destiny than any sort of capitalistic ire. Secondly, colonies and furthermore imperialism were a product of the monarchy and the crown trying to gather more power for themselves, of age-old feudalism, so it's unfair to blame imperialism and the conquest of the natives and other peoples on capitalism. On his last point about all the human rights atrocities that the United States committed in order to combat the rise of communism, he's right, there is no excuse for that. That is a capitalistic regime running around committing human rights atrocities. If you're an end justify the means kind of person, which I'm not, you could point to Japan and South Korea and say, look at how much better they turned out than all their neighbors, which fell to communism. North Korea, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. But overall, it's a very fair point.
What are the components of communism that we should seriously have a conversation about integrating into the American body politic and economic?
I would say that the two big things that I really want to struggle for over my lifetime, that I consider basically approaches towards communism, is decommodifying everything. We see in the United States that everything, including like caring for other people and all of the things that we find essential to our lives need to be priced in order to be exchanged in markets. And I just don't think that that's true. I mean, I think that lots of things are inherently valuable and ought to be treated that way, and shouldn't be treated like they're just commodities for exchange. And then the other thing is work. I mean, the CBO report that came out saying that 2 or 3 million people are going to leave work because like they're not hostage to work anymore because they have health care. That's a good thing. And the more that we can free people from the tyranny, not just of, I mean, libertarians have it right that governments can be tyrannical. Obviously, that's true. But the other thing that's tyrannical that libertarians won't acknowledge is the tyranny of work. We live in this democracy, but we put ourselves in tyranny for 8 hours a day. They can fire you, and if you don't have a job, you're basically cut off from the means of your own subsistence. So liberating people from that second tyranny of work and making sure that people can live a full life and produce culture and community without having to work for a boss that's trying to work them harder and pay them less in order to get rich, that's really the essence, I think, of a socialist or if you prefer, communist vision.
Do you think...
I'm really glad that the host of the show asked him this question and gives him a lot of rope. Enough to hang himself. I mean, look, here's a direct quote. All of the things we find essential to our lives need to be priced in order to be exchanged in markets, and I just don't think that that's true. I mean, I don't think that that's what it means, but the way it sounds is that he doesn't think things need to be priced in order to be exchanged in markets. But what I really think he's getting at here is that, things like food, water, shelter, shouldn't be priced, they should be given freely to all citizens. But how on earth could someone provide those kind of services if there wasn't an intrinsic price or value that the person was getting out of it? For example, a farmer's not going to grow crops unless he can expect to get paid for them and not just get them seized by the state. Also, he says that some things are inherently valuable and ought to be treated as such and shouldn't just be exchanged. And, I agree with him here. I think some things aren't intrinsically valuable, like human life. But it's already illegal to exchange, humans and whatnot on the market. And so I don't really know what things you're saying here are intrinsically valuable. Is he saying like stuff is, food is, animals are? I don't know. But I think it's wrong to equate anything with the value of human life.
Do you think one way to start moving in that direction is this movement that is, the Swiss are going to be voting on this in the few months, of a guaranteed minimum income? There's a variation of it actually going on in Alaska with the permanent fund. Everybody, man, woman, child, baby, everybody gets $2,000 a year.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't see a step forward from a meaningful step forward from capitalism to a more liberatory, fulfilling economic system that doesn't include a universal basic income. I think that's absolutely crucial. I think it's best paired with a job guarantee for several reasons, but basically it makes whereas right now what we have is involuntary unemployment, millions of people who want a job and can't find them, and involuntary employment, where there's millions of people who want to quit their job but can't because they need the pension or they need health care or whatever. We want to move to a system that has voluntary employment and voluntary unemployment. And I think that's really, really crucial. A universal basic income will be necessary for that sort of emancipatory transformation.
Jesse Meyerson, thanks so much. It's a brilliant analysis.
Thanks, Tom.
A guaranteed minimum income is guaranteeing that everyone in the country makes a certain amount of money every year, regardless of gainful employment or not. As a small government type of person, I was initially very opposed to this idea when I began researching it. But as I researched more and more, my resistance began to crumble. As much as I disagree with this guy's politics, I can agree that a guaranteed minimum income is liberatory in nature. It does free you from the tyranny and influence that your boss does have over you. When times are hard and unemployment is high, your employer has an inordinate amount of control over your personal life. They can demand your Facebook password, demand to search your personal home, demand that you don't do drugs or alcohol, or other such stuff. Having a guaranteed minimum income would be a safety net that people can fall back on. Also, having a guaranteed minimum income would be useful for childcare and help single mothers, since even the children would receive the guaranteed minimum income. It is always dangerous when you discourage work. As such, the guaranteed minimum income would need to be less than what a minimum wage person.
Now, everything you know about communism is right.
As always, like, comment, and subscribe. If you liked the video, tell me what you would like to see on the show in the future. And if you disliked the video, please give me some feedback to improve. Anyway, see you guys later.